So Israel seems to be the center of attention for everyone here in the United States, and because of that, we need to talk about the pro-Israel lobbying group that's sole purpose is influencing the US-Israel relationship, AIPAC. Now, not only is AIPAC a pro-Israel lobbying group with millions of members across the US, according to them up to 5 million members, but they are also widely considered one of the most powerful lobbying groups in the entire country. Yeah, I'm sure nothing bad comes from that, right? In this video, we'll be going over what AIPAC is and why it matters, the arguments that support AIPAC, the arguments against AIPAC, and then of course, my brutally honest opinion on this matter because yes, AIPAC is a problem. If you're new here, I'm Lou Hawley, and welcome to the family. All right, before we can fully dive into the weeds of this controversial organization of AIPAC, or the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, we have to understand, at least on a base level, what AIPAC is. Simply put, they are an incredibly influential, bipartisan, pro-Israel lobbying group in the United States that advocates for policies strengthening the U.S.-Israel relationship. And you could say that their definition of strengthening is subjective. Their main activity is lobbying the U.S. Congress and executive branch on legislation and issues related to Israel. Okay, now let's back up for just a second because I was discussing this with someone just a couple days ago and they didn't even have the slightest idea what lobbying even was. And without a base level understanding of lobbying, none of this will make any sense to you. So very simply put, lobbying is basically professional persuading. Big companies, unions, nonprofits, and advocacy groups hire people, or lobbyists, to meet with lawmakers and their staff to push for laws or regulations that help their side, that help their organization. They do it by sharing data, drafting bill language, arranging hearings, and building relationships, plus something a bit darker through legal channels to get access to these politicians, but we'll touch on that soon, I promise, because that's the dark shit. In short, lobbying is how organized interests try to shape the rules we all have to live under. And now that we're all caught up, AIPAC's main activity is lobbying the U.S. Congress and executive branch in order to push legislation that benefits the U.S.-Israel relationship. And, I'll put that in quotes, the U.S.-Israel relationship, because there's a lot to unpack there. And obviously what one considers beneficial to our relationship with Israel is incredibly subjective. Don't let them tell you it's not. And honestly, I'm going to be real with you. Lobbying our Congress and executive branch isn't the most impactful part of their operation. It's a huge issue. Yeah. And we'll dive into that, don't you worry. But there's another side to what they do as an enormous organization that I find so gross. And I honestly just can't even believe that we allow it. But of course, AIPAC supporters don't think anything they do is questionable or subjective even in the slightest. Which brings us to the first side we'll discuss of this incredibly polarizing organization, the AIPAC supporters.
We get massive benefits from Israel. Israel shares the Mossad as one of the best intelligence sources on the planet. The enemies of Israel, the people who hate Israel, they all hate us. It's almost a perfect overlap. And so if we tried to recreate, if we're just trying to defend America, we tried to recreate the national security benefits of our alliance with Israel, it would cost, $30 billion, $300 billion.
That's a lot of billions. Basically, we can break down what Senator Ted Cruz just said into 4 main points. Israel and the United States have the same enemies. Therefore, AIPAC advocating for policies aimed at confronting these shared threats like Iran having access to nuclear weapons is in the benefit of both countries. And therefore, AIPAC is actually helping us out because they make sure our politicians don't forget this incredibly important information. 2, national security and information. Supporters of AIPAC argue that Israel serves as an anchor of stability and a source of intelligence in the volatile region of the Middle East. And this sharing of intelligence helps to protect Americans from terror attacks because they are basically providing us with eyes and ears on the ground over there. 3, we share cutting-edge military and defense technology with each other. And 4, arguably the most important point that Senator Ted Cruz and other Israeli AIPAC supporters bring up, Israel's determination to defend itself and its homeland with its own personnel reduces the need for a large American presence in the Middle East. Basically, summarizing everything, the enemies of Israel are also the enemies of the United States, and therefore supporting Israel with some tax dollars ultimately benefits us because we give them some money, they fight our enemies, they give us information, and we don't have to worry about American soldiers having to fight wars over there anymore, or as often, I guess. It's a win-win, and therefore AIPAC is good for the United States because they make sure that bond between our two countries remains strong. Now look, obviously, we could deep dive into each of these topics and explore the nuances, but generally speaking, I don't disagree with any of this. But why is AIPAC such a problem if I agree that there are benefits from the United States and Israel working together? If Israel gives us information, helps develop defense technology, and reduces the number of our men needed in the Middle East, and AIPAC helps maintain that relationship, why do I have such a problem with AIPAC? And this brings us to the arguments against AIPAC. Well, actually, let me ask you a question first. If I were to tell you that in the 2024 election cycle, every single candidate, every single one of them that was endorsed by Jeff Bezos won their primary race, would that make you feel a little uncomfortable? Maybe, maybe not. Well, now let me ask you another question. If I were to tell you that in the 2024 election cycle, every single candidate that was endorsed by Jeff Bezos won their primary race because Jeff Bezos ran millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of ads attacking the candidates he wanted to lose without even mentioning in those attack ads that the reason he didn't like them was because they stood against Amazon doing something, would that make you feel uncomfortable? Well, it should. Jeff Bezos plays a huge role in who wins their primary races across the entire country. 68% of all current members of Congress are endorsed by Bezos. Now, none of that is actually true, and Bezos didn't actually do that, but AIPAC did. AIPAC flaunts the fact that every candidate they endorsed in the 2024 election cycle won their primary race. They flaunt the fact that they endorse and give money to 70% of our congressional members currently in office. So, do you remember when I said that they engage in something a bit darker that grants them access to our politicians? Well, when you spend millions and millions and millions and tens of millions and tens of millions and tens of millions of dollars to get people elected across this country, you are guaranteeing yourself a major seat at their table whenever they're trying to decide which way they're going to vote on any legislation. So a serious argument people share that stand against AIPAC is that their significant financial resources have to put it lightly, a disproportionate influence on our elections, and therefore give them a disproportionate influence on our policy. Now, argument number 2 against this lobbying organization comes down to a really interesting question. Do you think the United States' one-sided support of Israel, at least, and that support is at least partially driven by AIPAC's influence, do you think that increases anti-American sentiment across the Middle East or decreases anti-American sentiment across the Middle East? That's at least something to think about. I mean, especially when AIPAC has been accused of lobbying the U.S. to support Israeli policies like the expansion of Israeli settlements into the West Bank, which is apparently in violation of international law, by the way. I mean, do you think that helps our reputation on the global stage? Do you think that makes it easier or harder to negotiate a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Do you think that makes the countries in the Middle East more or less likely to seek destruction against the U.S.? These are at least questions worth thinking about. And now, whatever your thoughts are on those questions, It doesn't even matter, because the point is AIPAC claims to lobby on behalf of the U.S.-Israel relationship, because that relationship, according to AIPAC, strengthens the United States. It strengthens our country. But I just posed a single question that I bet a lot of us have different opinions on. So when AIPAC says they want to strengthen our relationship with another country because it's in our benefit, we have to at least ask ourselves. We have the obligation to at least ask ourselves, is it? Because I don't know. You don't know. And that's the point. A lobbying group that spends $100 million on one single election cycle, that is a phone call away from 70% of our congressional members, that can potentially unseat more than half the people in at least the House, appears to lobby on behalf of what they think most benefits a foreign country. And because they say what's best for that country is also what's best for our country, we're supposed to just nod along, not ask any questions, whatever. And look, I don't disagree that Israel's alliance with the United States is a powerful alliance. I also do believe that Israel has the right to defend itself. Do I agree with everything the IDF does or everything Netanyahu says? No, because I'm a human with thought and I understand there's nuance to the issue. But my question is, how does a lobbying group that lobbies on policy issues related to another country, how are they able to have this much influence on our government? Well, our politicians face more backlash for questioning that than they do for just blindly going along with that. I don't care if you're pro-Israel or anti-Israel. If you don't question a lobbying group with their affiliate PACs and super PACs having this much supposed influence, you are being intentionally ignorant to the potential corruption within our government and the ties that corruption may share with this specific lobbying organization. Now, this is important to understand because without understanding what I'm about to say, you can't understand this issue at all. China, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Japan, Liberia, more than half the countries in the world have agents that lobby members of the US government on behalf of their country's government. It's true. But here's the catch. They have to register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, known as FARA. F-A-R-A. Now, FARA mandates that organizations and individuals acting as agents for foreign entities or individuals publicly disclose activities and financial transactions related to their work for that foreign principal. These regulations are designed to provide complete transparency so the U.S. government and the public, you and me, are aware of their activities so that we can easily see whose agenda is being pushed. AIPAC is not required to do this. AIPAC is privately funded and registered by Americans, maybe Americans with a dual citizenship with Israel, but Americans nonetheless. And although AIPAC may be in contact with the foreign government of Israel, and they may be functioning as a coordinated extension of Israeli interests, they are technically not formally, on paper, acting at the behest of Israel. This may seem incredibly confusing, I know, so let me simplify it really quick as easily as I can, okay? This means that AIPAC operates as a domestic lobbying group registered under the LDA, which means we do not have anywhere near the same level of transparency into their activities and financial transactions as the organizations registered under FARA. Okay, now open up those ears really quick because I'm about to go over the two final major arguments against AIPAC and the way they currently operate, but they're super important, and the second one is going to be actually setting us up for my opinion on this issue, so tune in for a sec, okay? AIPAC lobbies for billions of dollars in aid to be sent to Israel, a rather wealthy country, every single year, while plenty of people continue to struggle here in the US, okay? That's something to at least keep in the back of your head. But my biggest issue with AIPAC is that they silence dissent and stifle debate here in the United States. AIPAC aggressively attacks politicians and journalists and academics, basically anyone with any reach who questions Israeli government policies. And how do they do this? Well, typically by pulling a play from the far left's playbook. And, they accuse all these people that speak against Israel's government of being, anti-Semitic. Now, sure, there are definitely real anti-Semites out there, obviously, but they throw around this word like BLM throws around the word racist. I mean, you and your supporters have said it so much that it has started to lose its meaning, just like the word racist or homophobic. But by doing this, by using their financial resources and by tapping their politicians, AIPAC and its members have seemingly completely stifled discussion and debate around any topics related to Israel. And guess what? Open discussion and open debate are crucial components of a healthy democracy. And this brings us to my completely honest thoughts on this topic. I am not one of those people that thinks AIPAC is the root of all corruption within our government. I'm not saying that AIPAC is the worst thing in our country or that organized Jewry or whatever people say is destroying our world. I am saying that organized lobbying that clearly owns a majority of our politicians and has the financial resources to decide who sits in office, who has the resources to decide who the men and women are that draw up and pass the legislation that affects our lives, is bad. And not just bad, it is anti-democratic at its root. It is the opposite of everything this beautiful country was supposed to be. And while I believe we should condemn all big lobbying groups, PACs and super PACs, like, for example, Future Forward USA, who spent hundreds of millions on the 2024 elections after receiving donations from people like Michael Bloomberg and Bill Gates. The issue is that AIPAC is the only lobbying entity that we all seem afraid to call out. I still don't even know if I'm going to post this video because I don't want to be accused of being anti-Semitic or whatever else, even though that has nothing to do with this video I'm making. Whether, this fear is coming from fears of being called anti-Semitic, or whether politicians are afraid of losing their position, or whether groups are afraid of losing their funding, or for whatever reason, AIPAC is seemingly the only major player that the majority of the country refuses to criticize across both parties. And hear me out when I say this. We must call out all major organizations and entities that are destroying our democratic system just because they have enough money to do so. Lobbying in itself has become so large and influential that we need to completely tear down and rebuild that entire system. Super PACs should honestly just be completely banned, and open debate should return as a foundation of our country. And AIPAC abuses our lobbying system. They abuse our super PAC system, and they abuse their ability to silence dissenting opinions. So yes, strip away the name, strip away their leverage, and strip away the shield of victimhood that they hide behind, and anyone that isn't manipulated, bought off, or just outright ignorant should agree that AIPAC falls in the large bucket of organizations that needs a complete system rework in order for us, you and me, the individuals in this country, to not only remain free, but to have a real voice that matters. No matter how you look at it, any organization having this much influence over who sits in positions of power in Washington, D.C. is dangerous and undemocratic. Point blank, that's the end of the discussion.